Hello, everybody, and welcome to our first ever Harpsichord Hangout. I am so delighted to welcome you to this special event, and I'd like to give a special shout out to our trustees who are joining us and friends of Juilliard's at various membership levels. I know that we also have some evening division students with us and alumni of the school. It is not lost on any of us how vital the support that we get from all of you is, both financially and spiritually at this point. I have been trying to force myself to find the silver lining in what is an awfully cloudy environment these days. You got to break out the silver polish from time to time. But one of the things that I've come to terms with is moments like this, when we can get together. Actually, folks are from across the world, as it turns out. I'm just seeing a comment, a hello from Buenos Aires. We can get together and chat about something that matters and something that we love and share a moment of community together. So for that, I'm very grateful, as we are always grateful for your support. If you are not yet a member of Juilliard, you will be hypnotized by the harpsichord this evening. So please be prepared to join us for the long haul. We've got a great show in store with lots of sort of interesting tidbits, performances, chat. And the first guest that I'd like to welcome onto the screen with me is the very, very esteemed harpsichordist, organist, forte pianist, clavichord specialist, educator, church musician, and all-around fabulous colleague, Peter Sykes.
Hello.
Hello, Peter. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
It is so nice to see you. Where are you, Peter?
I am in Lynn, Massachusetts, known as the City of Sin. It's where I live, and I commute down to Juilliard for lessons, or at least I used to. Now I do it virtually.
So when lessons were in person, you were coming down on Amtrak with some regularity to teach our harpsichord majors, in addition to classes that you teach. It might be interesting for folks to just hear very briefly about your charge at Juilliard.
Well, besides my wonderful 4 harpsichord major students and 2 secondary students who are pianists who are learning about the harpsichord, I teach 2 classes. One of them is in historic improvisation. Music making used to be just as much improvisation as reading off the printed page. And so, but we have some catching up to do in order to how to learn that. And the second class is in performance practice, which is, in a way, what we think about in learning how performers of the past approach the music. But my focus in this class is how performers of the present learn to approach this music, informed by the past, because we are the historically informed performance department.
That sounds pretty heavy duty and really useful, of course, because we are talking about music that was primarily written in the 17th and 18th centuries. There are no recordings. There is no video evidence. There is all sorts of other traces in the sand that allow us to interpret what we think the music might have sounded like, or where it was played and when, by whom, why. And that's part of what your classes and so many others at Juilliard are getting at, so that our students can become fluent in this quite foreign language known as the past. Did I get that right?
Absolutely. The only thing I would like to add is that what is really most important is that we learn to speak to the people around us. This is not the revival of a dead art, but it's a way of making the art of the past live for today.
I'm so glad you said that, because, you know, just because it's old doesn't mean it's irrelevant. And in fact, the music speaks to us as directly today as I think it must have for the audiences back when it was first heard for the first time. One of the features of tonight's Harpsichord Hangout is the sudden appearance of a few trivia questions, because we're not sure how well-versed in harpsichord lore and facts our audience is. So if we may, my colleagues behind the scene, I'd love to head to our first trivia question. Are harpsichords are the strings of the harpsichord plucked or struck? That is our first question. You are welcome to pop your answers into the chat. If you are the successful winner, you have the most important prize of all, which is bragging rights. And we'll see if there are any other guesses. The machine stops, says harpsichord strings are plucked. Going once, going twice. Oh, we've got a concurrence there. Peter, please reveal the answer.
Harpsichord strings are plucked.
They are indeed. I've never been a game show host, but it's suddenly going to my head, actually, because I think that's the way they talk all the time. So thank you, behind the scenes friends, and thank you for audience members who joined us in that. Peter, in a nutshell, which is a probably hard thing to do, the harpsichord has so many identities and so many uses. Could you sort of list maybe just briefly what the main role of this instrument is, where it appears and why?
The first appearance of a harpsichord in any documented literature is in a manuscript dated 1440, which is a long time ago, and before there was any solo keyboard repertoire. We understand that the fundamental purpose of most keyboard instruments, then as now, is to give singers the pitches from which they must sing. After that, there is a question of transcription of vocal literature. There's always been a connection with singing. And so I think that trying to find a way of making the harpsichord sing is one of my most important things as a player myself and as a teacher. Other than that, the harpsichord is the central instrument of Baroque music. It is used as the accompaniment for soloists, chamber music, and the orchestra. It is a vehicle for composition. And of course, there is a rich solo literature of music written specifically for the harpsichord, which pianists think they can play, and I'm certainly allowing them to try.
The central instrument of the Baroque repertoire, spoken like a true harpsichordist, I might add. That's great, Peter. Thank you for that. That's a beautifully succinct summary, actually, of the guises and uses of this instrument, of which, you know, we have a number at Juilliard, actually, and a number of students, and use them so regularly. As we speak, actually, down in the Sharp Theater on the stage is a production of an opera by Handel called Teseo, a Baroque opera. And on that stage are our masked and safely socially distanced students and singers who are working together to put this opera on film, actually. So we're looking forward to, in a few months' time, when the final product is released to us online. And the harpsichord, I mention it because the harpsichord is such a central feature of any opera, and certainly we've spent a lot of time on it in preparation for this production, which is probably exactly the right time to bring up our next trivia question, if we may. What are the keyboards on a harpsichord called? We're getting a little bit more serious because now we're talking about anatomy, the anatomy of an instrument, that is. What are the keyboards on a harpsichord called? Curious if anybody would care to put in a chat. Manuals is one. It's interesting to note, I guess, while we're waiting for a couple more answers, Peter, that harpsichords can have more than one keyboard. Do you mind just telling us the backstory of that?
Well, the harpsichord is somewhat related to the organ, in which we need to have different keyboards to be able to make quick changes of sound without changing stops. Harpsichords have stops like an organ, which you can put back and forth. And so the greatest majority of harpsichords in the 17th and 18th centuries were single keyboard harpsichords. But mostly in the 20th century now, they're two keyboard harpsichords because That's what makes it most different than the piano. There were in the there was one sort of like freak instrument that had three, and of course that brings to the question: why do you need three keyboards when you only have two hands? And then the question is that you want to be able to make very quick changes of sound.
Fantastic. We've got a couple of answers. The consensus does seem to be that the keyboards on a harpsichord are called manuals. It is true that there is such a thing as a single or a double harpsichord based on the number of keyboards it has. I know everybody is on the edge of their seat to hear the answer is in fact manuals because, Peter, why are they called manuals?
Because they're not pedals.
But chink, I'll be here all night. But it's actually true, in fact. They are manuals because they are played with the mani, your hands, in fact. So a keyboard on a harpsichord is called a manual. We have been talking about harpsichords, but it's no substitute for actually hearing a harpsichord. So what we'd like to do next, actually, is share with you a performance given by historical performance majors at Juilliard. This is our graduate program in early music. This performance was filmed back in 2019. Remember concerts when you could actually go and see the music in person? But we have this this lovely performance of a movement of a Bach concerto by students in 2019, filmed in Paul Recital Hall, right on the Juilliard campus. I'm sure you'll enjoy it, and we'll be back after the video plays. I'm sure that wild applause that we heard in the hall is only matched by the applause that you're giving at home from wherever you are. It's actually sort of like having a private home concert, isn't it? That performance was on a double manual harpsichord, and we chose it actually for a couple of reasons. One is because of the soloist is David Belkowski, who we'll have the great pleasure of meeting shortly. He's an alum of the historical performance program, and he happens to be back at Juilliard this week and over the past couple of weeks, assisting us with that production of Teseo that I mentioned. And he is also an alum of a program that we were so fortunate to host in the gorgeous hills of Tuscany, of all places. We teamed up with a harpsichord maker named Bruce Kennedy, who happens to have made the excellent choice to live in Tuscany. And that harpsichord that David played in the video was made by Bruce. So there is a circle here of connections. I had the chance, actually, to teleport via Zoom to Tuscany and interview Bruce. Well, it's more like a casual chat, to be perfectly honest. I caught him sort of unannounced in his atelier, his workshop, in a beautiful town called Castelnuzio, where he makes some of the world's finest instruments, I would say. And we've sort of compiled and edited the video into a format that we'd love to share with you so that you can get a sense of how a harpsichord is made, Bruce's work as one of our top instrument makers, and catch a glimpse of his workshop. So with that, I'll turn it over to this informal chat that Bruce and I had just a couple of weeks ago. So how many harpsichords will you have made in the last, say, 12 months?
2 restorations and 8 other instruments.
And from start to finish, from chopping down the tree to delivery of the instrument, how long does that take on average?
Well, it used to take a long time. And we have a kind of system that, well, let's take the past year. One of those orders has been on order, a Flemish double instrument that for financial reasons, this professor took 5 years to complete. But this, we sort of fixed the whole deal 5 years ago, respected it, and knowing that it was going to be open-ended, and delivered when the time was right for them. The Budapest Commission only happened midway through October.
So that's a really quick turnaround.
And they said, can you deliver an instrument in 7 weeks? Because we need to take legal possession of it before the 31st of December. And we produced a full double manual with all the bells and whistles in 7 weeks, because we have the sort of structure to, do such. And it's it's now with the collaboration of about 8 other people. Here's a French double manual instrument. This thing has been all sorts of gilt and painting, and you can see the kind of thing that has been done to it. Actually, I think your instrument at Juilliard has another style of decoration, but it's something similar to what has gone on this instrument. This is the beginnings of a concert double German, and we have another one which is going to receive its walls, the case, the bent side, and this what they call the spine and the cheek. That's all happening actually in the next 24 hours. Over here, there's a Italian harpsichord made out of Florentine cypress. It has sort of decorative details of carving. It's what they call skunk tail sharps. Here's another small instrument that I made for the Piccolo Academia about 10 years ago. It's similar to the one we were just looking at. This bandsaw is the continuing work on a keyboard. This particular instrument gets 2 keyboards. The concert instruments always have 2, often like organs.
There's the legs, I see.
Oscar's busy here regulating the easing, as we call it, to sort of the balancing and the way the key fits on the frame. Here we have my opus number 1 that I made in Switzerland back in 1980, which is being restored. There was a bad chinoiserie on it. I must say I'm surprised that I'm happy that it sounds as good as it does for being 40 years ago and 200 instruments ago. But I'm also happy to know that I've learned something in the last 200 instruments.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Was that Luca I saw in the studio? Was he?
Yeah. Luca, who you know as the Piccolo Academia chef extraordinaire.
Buonasera, come stai?
Yeah. So he's busy at keyboards. Your instrument is it's after an instrument that I got to know at the Musée Unterlinden in Colmar, France. And it's an original Rooker's instrument. And in fact, it was a dynasty of makers that this instrument became quite famous after its restoration. And as a result, well, I made one for Kenneth Weiss, who used to teach there at Juilliard. And subsequent to making that, Juilliard, the Guildhall in London, the Schola Cantorum in Basel, all ordered almost one after the other the same instrument. I simply enlarged it a bit so that it had a bit more use, that you have more keys in the bottom and the top, so you can play more literature. And so it's an adaptation of this 1624 Rookers sitting in the museum in Colmar, which is a splendid instrument. I had a visit one day from Benny Goodman's brother, who was part of the original quartet. His name was Harry. And he was visiting my shop in Switzerland, and he said, "Hey kid, you know, what do one of those machines cost?" At that point, Lionel Party had visited earlier in the summer and sort of said, "Gosh, you know, we should get one of these instruments over there." So I put Harry's thing together with, you know, Lionel Party's, your then professor of harpsichord, and put the 2 of them together, and voila, there you have it.
And am I remembering right? We have a photo of this, right? Didn't we share a photo of you?
Yeah, there's a picture of your former president. I think there's William F. Buckley and myself. He helped me in a way start the Piccolo Academia 30 years ago. So there's been a connection between my work and New York, you know, from a long time ago, from basically William Buckley and Harry Goodman.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So
all through the harpsichord, who would have known? Well, welcome back after that video. I don't know about you, but raise your hand if you miss travel. That just made me have the strongest urge to actually get on an airplane. We were supposed to have our workshop, of course, back for the third edition this past March, nearly a year ago, if you can believe it, but it alas got canceled, and it's not clear whether we'll be able to continue. We're facing some headwinds of finance and logistics, but in any case, we have certainly fond memories and a nice connection that we've made with Bruce Kennedy, and I was grateful for his time and showing us around the block, as it were. We are fortunate now to welcome in to the conversation David Belkovsky, who was the sublime soloist for the performance that you just heard. David is in an office at Juilliard, and he is improvising, as all good harpsichordists have to, improvising his internet connection, I should say. So if we have a little trouble with him, we'll forgive him. He's at the mercy of Juilliard's Wi-Fi system, which wasn't cooperating about 5 minutes ago, but seems to be good now. David, we can hear you. We can see you with your pandemic haircut. You look quite different from that video. And my first question for you actually has to do with the video that we just saw from Bruce Kennedy, and you were at the Piccola Accademia with us in the first edition. Do you want to just talk very briefly about that experience of being in that environment and playing as you did there?
Absolutely. And first of all, thank you for accepting me into the Piccola Accademia, because without HP, that wouldn't exist, that relationship between Bruce and North America, really. So I went, I think it was the summer of 2017, and he showed us the workshop. He allowed us to play all of the instruments that would then go on to dominate the stages of Bruges International Competition, the Bach Leipzig competition. He, in the best of terms, has a monopoly on the market because of how wonderful his instruments are, and is such a passionate builder, talks very openly with his hybrid of his color of instruments, that he tries not to necessarily pin down some historical sound, but to create something that he feels is uniquely a Bruce Kennedy as much as it is a Rookers. And I find it's inspiring to listen to somebody like him talk about instruments of that nature in the way that I talk about compositions or the sounds that come out of them. There's a clear love, and yeah, I remember that experience very fondly, not to mention being in the hills of Tuscany.
Yeah, it's not bad. Peter, that comment from David about the sounds and the kind of quality of different instruments, I'm curious if you could talk as a teacher now, actually putting on your teacher hat, how you approach that, because students play a range of different harpsichords. There's so many different models that one can buy on the showroom floor. When you're working with a student, well, now professional, like David, how do you approach that question of drawing out the colors of an instrument?
Well, unlike a violin or a flute, which makes no sound whatsoever without the body of the performer, the harpsichord makes its own sound. And so we treat it as an inspired dancing partner. We cannot really mold the sound. The instrument makes it for us. But we have to become world-class observers of the sound and reactors to the sound, so that we can let the sound that it makes us feel as though we are part of the creation process of the music. That's why it is so important to have the best quality instruments at our disposal. It's not necessary that they be copies of old instruments, but that they be beautiful new instruments in their own right. Those are the instruments that inspire us as performers, not only in terms of our own reaction, but what it does for the music.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. I hate to interrupt these proceedings, but it is time for our next trivia question. So if I could ask our friends to show the next trivia slide, that would be great. Alrighty, so my favorite harpsichord word is plectrum, because it's fun to say. And And I'm curious to know if anybody viewing at home knows what the definition is. What is a plectrum? Anybody care to hazard a guess? You're basically anonymous, so don't be embarrassed. It's not a food. It's not animal, vegetable, or mineral. Well, it could be animal-ish, actually, couldn't it, in fact? We'll get to that in a second. The thing that, well, very close, I think there's a letter missing there, but the thing that plucks, yes, thank you for fixing the type of the plastic or quill. Ted Sperling, of course, the great conductor, knows the answer because he's a harpsichord player himself, as is Jeff Grossman, who is one of our illustrious alums. It is the singular of plectra. Jeff, is that helping? All right, everybody's on the edge of their seat. The plastic plucker. May we have the answer, panelists? Also called quill, plectra. Pluck the strings of the harpsichord. David, why is it also called quill? If we can just get that out of the way quickly.
Yeah, some builders will go off to ponds and try to harvest goose quill as opposed to using Delron or some other material for their plectra.
So harpsichords are not always vegetarian friendly, as it turns out. I'd love to turn the attention back to you, David, and if you could give us sort of who are you and how you got to be who you are, which is to say, how did you come to the harpsichord?
I came to it from the same curiosity that I think brought me to early music, brought me to exploring other ways of playing. I was at the time wrapping up my undergrad and discovered the forte piano in a lot of the same ways. I was stuck in libraries, downloading CDs and reading liner notes and falling in love with the sounds of historical performance groups. And I had taken Baroque performance practice classes and continuo generalized classes that taught me concepts, but never really sat down at the instrument, and then was asked by the great Eduardo Bellotti, who taught there at the time, to play what was called a duo partimento sonata, probably the most demanding improvisation that could go on. I was asked to do before anything else. I had no idea what it meant to play from figures, no idea but I dived in headlong and probably sank more than swam. And it stuck with me since then. I was in love with the sounds and the way it contributed to the ensemble or even as a solo instrument.
Fantastic. I hope that, what's palpable to me coming through my video screen, which we all spend so much time on, is your passion for the instrument. And I wonder, Peter, if I could ask you a similar question, but maybe I am curious to know, because I don't actually, how you came to the harpsichord, but I'm also curious to know how you came to teaching. Or are they one and the same?
I will try to be succinct. All right. So I started to take piano lessons when I was 7, and it turned out that I was good at it. By the time I was 12, I was playing concertos with a local orchestra. My mother, who was a first grade teacher for 30 years, always thought that education was a good thing. And so she brought home from the supermarket a 99-cent LP, yes, I am that old, called Greatest Harpsichord Hits. When I heard that LP, my life changed. I heard that sound and I said, that is what I need to do. And I went to my parents and said, I want a harpsichord. I need to play a harpsichord. And they said, but we just took out a second mortgage on our house to buy you a Steinway piano. It's not going to happen. Those were the days when harpsichords were also available as kits, where a home builder could put one together. And so my parents drove me to Waltham, Massachusetts, to the harpsichord shop of Frank Hubbard, where we got a double manual French harpsichord, and I built it for myself in 9 months, and by the age of 15, I had my own harpsichord.
You were not a normal kid, is what you're saying, and we're the beneficiaries of your of your
Indeed not.
nationality. And your first teaching gig, Peter, very briefly, what was your first?
My first teaching gig was at my alma mater, the Cape Cod Conservatory of Music and Arts, where I started to take lessons when I was 9 years old.
Oh, how neat.
And yeah,
Wow.
I had 25 students under the age of 10 at that point. And it was it was an interesting experience for me to try and transmit those values that I had learned in late graduate school to 8-year-olds.
Yes, I would imagine so. Well, really interesting. Thank you so much for humanizing all of this for us, both of you. Before we get to our next segment, I do have to interrupt the proceedings with our fourth of 5 trivia questions for this evening, if we may, dear friends. Oh boy. Which Polish keyboardist revived interest in the harpsichord during the early 20th century, premiering new works by Defaya and Poulenc? Noting that we haven't talked about new music or contemporary music for harpsichord, but it is a thing. It really does exist. This is a specialty item, Wanda Landowska. Ted Sperling, I'm just going to reveal, with the win. Wanda Landowska. Peter, will you give us the briefest summary for folks who may not know who dear Wanda Landowska was, who she was?
Like many of us, she fell in love with old music and decided that that was what she was going to devote her life to, and the harpsichord. At the same time, she was friends with many composers. It's important to say not only did she premiere those works by Defaya and Poulenc, she commissioned them. She was really intent on making the harpsichord live in the contemporary music world of her day. And so that we owe her a great amount of thanks so often and so continuously. The instrument that she played was not what we would call a harpsichord today. Her playing techniques were really different from what we would do today, and yet there are so many people who said, I fell in love with a harpsichord by listening to her recordings. She earned her place in harpsichord heaven. Let's just say that.
Well, that is a corner of heaven to which we all may aspire. David is on his way there, but please not too soon. But we actually have a slice of harpsichord heaven to share next, which is a very special performance that David made for us. Well, actually, for you, those of you who are watching, this is a world premiere recording of a piece that is close to David's heart. It's exclusive for this event. It was filmed, 10 days ago at the most, I think, upstairs in our orchestra studio. And I'd love, David, very briefly, if you could just introduce it for us. Let us know what it is, why you chose it, and perhaps something people should listen out for.
So the reason I chose Jean Roy's piece La Marche des Scythes, the March of the Scythians, is more that it meant a lot to me when I found the harpsichord, because it was probably the first showstopper that I saw than anything else, really. The piece itself was of the programmatic ilk for the time, so they started to fall in love with pieces that might portray an image, and I think you'll hear quite a bit of a marching quality to this piece. But Roy himself was the preeminent harpsichordist of his time in the milieu of Rameau and great French Baroque composers. So what you'll notice is a lot of theatricality and a lot of the most current harpsichord techniques of the time being used. In my left hand, in the timings that he offers, and his particular notation, which I recommend everyone, if they can, to dig this piece up on IMSLP and see just how it was laid out for as a feast for the eyes.
Wow, that was amazing. David, that was an extraordinary performance. Peter, I think some debt of gratitude is owed to you as well as the teacher for making something like that possible. But that's sheer talent, and what a showpiece, and an earworm, I might add. I've listened to it a bunch of times, and it's not going away. It sticks with you. I know that David needs to leave very shortly because he's due back downstairs for rehearsal that's happening, the opera that I mentioned before. But just before he leaves, I'd love to get one of our first questions in from the audience. If anybody has asked a question, if my friends could share one question that's come in while we've been listening, I'd love to get David in on it before he has to depart. So a coupler on the instrument to play both sets of manuals together. So those of you who are astutely watching may have noticed that it seemed like there was a phantom set of hands on the upper keyboard depressing the keys. David, what was really happening?
Well, the tools can be engaged simultaneously if you, in this case, it's a shove coupler, together by moving the upper manual forward or back out if you want to uncouple them. So you can play them one at a time if they're with the upper register if I want a different kind of sound, or upper manual. And in this case, it's far too much of a fire and all stops literally. So in this case, I wanted to couple the two manuals together in order to engage both of them at the same time.
Well, thanks. It's an amazing party trick, actually. David, I want to thank you for joining us tonight, and I want to make sure that you have enough time to get back downstairs safely. And it sounds like your Wi-Fi may be conking out as well, so the timing could be just right, actually, for you to take your leave. As much as we'd love for you to stick around, bravo to you, and best of luck on the rest of tonight's rehearsal downstairs. And I know I join the audience in thanking you for your participation. So we will see you soon, and Peter and I will stick it out here on our own.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to be. Hopefully, I can get in touch with whoever wants to learn more about the harpsichord and hear more of my performances. I'm happy to.
That's fantastic. We will make sure that the connections are made. Thanks so much. Before we move on to the next question from the audience, it is time for the final trivia question of the night. If I may ask for it to be displayed on the screen, please. All right, this is kind of an insider one, so there's probably one or two people on this event who will know the answer. How many harpsichords does Juilliard own? It's a free-for-all, so it's kind of like winning the lottery. There is not a prize of a harpsichord, I'm afraid, but this is the final trivia question. If anybody would like to hazard a guess, we know that Juilliard owns way more than 200 Steinway pianos. We do not know nearly that many harpsichords. I'll give you a hint if anybody cares to be brave enough to give it a try. To guess. Anyone? Too shy, huh? 101, if only. That would be a lot of tuning. The trivia question that we didn't ask on this event is how many times does our tuner, Masayuki Maki, tune instruments at Juilliard, harpsichords that is, a year? He tunes about 800 times per year, in fact. So it's an enormous thing. Let's see, 101, 27, 5 or 3. Well, there are some that are in the ballpark. I won't keep you waiting any longer. And we can display the answer as 16. We own 16 harpsichords at Juilliard, and we're so lucky to have them. Some of them made possible by gifts from folks actually who are watching this broadcast. Others were acquisitions that we made in other ways. Others have just seemed to always been at Juilliard. They sort of amassed themselves somehow. We also have a number of other historical keyboard instruments, a portative organ, a couple of forte pianos, clavichord. Peter's been so generous in loaning some of the instruments in his personal collection to students as well. So David, for example, has one of Peter's instruments in his apartment at his disposal. So it's an amazing connection. Let us go on to the next question that has come in from our audience, if we may. Oh boy, Martin Nass. Peter, I'm going to let you take this one. Who, in your opinion, is or was the greatest harpsichord player? That is, them's are fighting words, I would say, but.
So, of course, it's traditional to answer a question with another question. Who was the greatest pianist? Who was the greatest composer? Who was the greatest conductor? It's all a matter of opinion. At the same time, I think one is usually inclined to ask who among the players had the most influence on the field. Who were the persons that opened up doors, that made it possible for the listening public to care about the harpsichord or the piano or the orchestra, whatever. And so I would answer that with two names. There's no way that one could answer it with just one. And so one of them would be the aforementioned Wanda Landowska. She was a pioneer. She was a person who really sacrificed an awful lot in order to be able to make the harpsichord what it is today in the minds and ears and hearts of listeners. The second would be the great Dutch player Gustav Leonhardt, who pointed us all in a direction that was more towards the historical orientation of the harpsichord. I think that those two players were probably the ones in our century, in our lifetime. Of course, one could say who is the greatest harpsichord player. It was probably J.S. Bach, Scarlatti, but we have no way of knowing because their performances are not available to us today.
Cool, great answer. Thank you. So Landowska and Leonhardt are the answers to, or Peter's answers in any case. Yeah, 2 L's. Great. I think we have time for a question or two more, if you don't mind displaying them for us. The colors of the keys. Yeah, the key, so interesting. The decoration and color choices on the keyboard. Why are they reversed on a harpsichord and a pianoforte or forte piano? Asks Frank Padula. Peter, I'm going to turn it over to you again, because as somebody who has now publicly admitted having built a harpsichord, this is something that you must be quite familiar with.
I do know that. Well, first of all, not all harpsichords have that scheme. English harpsichords look like pianos in that regard. Italian harpsichords, all the coverings of the keys are wood. Boxwood for the naturals, like a recorder, and walnut or ebony for the sharps. The reverse keyboard colors that we associate with the harpsichord were at first exclusively a French phenomenon. And that there are a couple of reasons for this. One is that naturals take up more area on the keyboard than sharps. Ebony is cheaper than ivory. And so to have the sharps covered with ivory and the keyboard and the rest of the naturals covered with ebony was a more cost-effective solution. And that there are a number of other reasons that I don't care to go into right now, but I think that in general, I think that we have more French-inspired harpsichords in the 20th century, 21st, than were ever in play in the 17th and 18th centuries. The harpsichord is now more of a French thing, and so we have more French-style keyboards. And so those are two reasons.
Fantastic, actually. So it's a question of commodity and style, it sounds like. Price of commodities and styles partially in any case. Great. Let's see. Has there been another question that's come in? We'd love to hear it. Well, hello, Eric. Thank you so much for asking. Common pitfalls for pianists. This is a complicated one. Common pitfalls for pianists that they should be aware of when translating their technique to the harpsichord. Well, they are two quite different instruments in terms of playing technique and, of course, in construction and in all sorts of other ways. But Peter, is that a question that you feel comfortable giving out a couple of tips?
Absolutely.
Great.
The number one difference between the piano and the harpsichord is the harpsichord does not have a pedal near the floor that makes all the notes bleed together. There is no sustaining pedal on the harpsichord. One must use the fingers to make the same resonance that the piano can do with the right foot. That is really the most important thing. Every instrument depends on resonance to make a beautiful sound. And that the piano can do it with one simple gesture, the harpsichord needs more sustained and specific attention to the notes one plays in order to make the sound as resonant as anything else. After that, I would say that the most important thing that a harpsichordist can do is listen to make sure that the sound is one that is followed. Every harpsichord sound is three parts. There's the pluck at the beginning, there's a bloom where the sound becomes what it really can be, and then there's a decay. And so that be able to hearing what the three components are, and to make sure that one is really listening to the dynamics of every single individual note, or what make harpsichord playing soulful and artistic.
Just like you are, actually, Peter. Thank you for that gorgeous description. I'm going to make a T-shirt on the front of which says "Pluck and Bloom" and on the back says "Decay" as one walks away. I wish we had more time for more questions. Oh, I guess we do. We have one more. Great. I thought we were out of time, but one more. How often are they used in today's orchestras, or are they mainly used for chamber music performances? Asks Jean Golden. That's an interesting question, and we talked about the application of harpsichords and where they appear from time to time. I'm not sure if it's a quantitative or a qualitative answer, but Peter, if I may ask you to sort of give your take on it.
One does not find harpsichords used in orchestral performances of Bruckner or Mahler, but if a harpsichord is used, it will be used in Baroque music. Orchestras do now, because we are all, to some degree, historically informed, use harpsichords as an adjunct to the sound of the strings. And so I would say that most orchestras today use a harpsichord when they are playing Bach or Handel or any other Baroque composer as appropriate.
That's fantastic. I'm getting offstage signals that we are indeed wrapping up here. So I'd like to thank everybody so much for spending this hour with us, certainly to David Belkovsky and the great Peter Sykes for their insight and wisdom and warmth. If we were at Juilliard, and boy, do we so desperately want to be, those of you who've been to events with us in person know that the traditional ending of an event like this would be food. So we would all sort of totter out of whatever room we were in and enjoy Juilliard's finest catering and an icy glass of Prosecco, probably. So with that in mind, I would like to raise a virtual toast to everybody who joined us this evening, to Peter, to David, to the harpsichord, to Juilliard, and to better times ahead for all of us and good health. We're so blessed to have your support and so honored to share what we do with you. I will give over the screen to my colleague, Kaylin Giannini, who will usher us out with the final goodbye. Thanks so much for joining us. Kaylin.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Peter and David and Bruce, for guiding us and hanging out with us tonight. When we all go back to dinner parties one day, we all have a new question to ask the other guests. What is a plectrum? I can't wait to be able to do that again. We really are just so grateful to get the little glimpse of what's happening at Juilliard. It feels good to know that there's recording happening in the building still, and that you are all there and training both remotely and in person. We hope you'll join us for our next event on February 25th. It's our next member event. It will be a look back at the Juilliard opera production of Eugene Onegin. And we'll send details about that very soon. And if you're not a member, we hope you'll join us. Your support of Juilliard students really means more now than ever. I know we often say that, but it is truly the case. And we're grateful for your support and for tuning in tonight. Take care. Thank you.